You guys like cop stories? I got one from my father. See, he was the deputy of a small rural county when he was young. One day, they got a call from a resident who'd been seeing people hanging around an old trailer park, building bonfires and singing. He and the sheriff went to go check it out. But when they did, there were no signs of people or bonfires. Just as they were about to write it off as a senile old resident or a prank, they started to get into the cruiser and noticed an old pile of charred wood a few meters away, like an old fire that was made years ago. At that, they decided to check out the trailers. My dad entered one of them. He said that everything was charred or burnt black, although on the outside everything looked fine. He said that it didn't smell of ash. It smelled as if someone had burnt fat or cooked with blood. It smelled of rot as well. And he kept hearing this whispering sound, but he figured it was the wind. The sheriff didn't find anything else in the other trailers, but he claimed that he also heard the whispering sound. When they got back to the cruiser, they called the station, but they could only get static on the radio. Suddenly, a faint voice seemed to crackle through the static. "You can't fool old Nick." The sheriff picked up the receiver and asked, "Come again?" "You can't deal with old Nick and get away with it," it said again, clear as day this time. The static died, and the radio cut back to normal police chatter. The operator asked, "Come again what, Sheriff?" They left at that point. From then on, every once in a while, people would call into the police station to report bonfires and people singing and running around the old trailer park. My dad would drive by, and every time he did, the radio would always go to static. On these calls, he said that he always felt as if someone was sitting next to him in the cruiser. I work law enforcement. Night watches are what I mostly do. I don't even know where to begin with the stories, from 911 hang-ups from houses that are abandoned, to audibles, that's signal alarms, from vacant buildings. Okay, I think I have a good one. So, dispatch contacted me requesting my position. I advised her of my location, and she sent me to an address advising a 911 call she had received over landline in reference to a screaming male begging for someone to stop. She gave the address the landline came from and suggested that I respond code 3. That's urgent. When I got there was a light on in the second-story bedroom window. I requested an additional unit, and when he arrived, we cleared the house together. Upon arriving to the room with the light on, well, it no longer was on. At this point, we decided to render it a prank call. But when we left, we were joined by 2 state troopers, who mentioned that the house was foreclosed 2 years ago. No one had lived there since. I returned to the station to hear the 911 call for myself, and let me tell you, those screams weren't playing. I think this was legit. We never received a call back, and the landline that was confirmed from AT&T was disconnected about 2 years ago as well. I'm a police officer. This one time, myself and a buddy on my squad responded to an alarm. The incident location was an old office-type building that had been converted into doctor's offices. There was a pharmacy attached to it, so we were worried about some druggie trying to score. Our dispatch received a motion signal from an upstairs office. The keyholder arrived on scene, and we go in to secure the building. The stairs were locked behind a door that, of course, the keyholder didn't have keys to, so we took the elevator up to the second floor. The elevator opened up to a pitch-black hallway, except for one overhead light just at the end of the hall. We start checking doors, and so far all are secured. We get to the last office, and sure enough, the door is unlocked. We make entry and observe it to be an unused office space. The door opened up to a sizable waiting room and reception area, with about 10 or 12 exam rooms, which we cleared all of with no hiccups. We exited the office, and immediately something seems off. That's when I realized the overhead light at the end of our hallway that had been on was now off, replaced by another light over by the elevators. I look at my squad mate, and he's gone completely white. I ask him what's wrong, and he says, "Weren't all those doors we just checked closed and locked?" I tell him, "Yeah." "So?" And he says, "Well, now they're all standing open." Let me tell you, pucker factor sinks in at this point. So we start clearing and securing rooms. We finish the last office, and on our way out, just before we turn the corner to get into the waiting area, the main door slams shut, and then our radios start going nuts with some kind of static feedback. Now I just want to get out of there. We quickly get back in the elevator and head down to the first floor to make contact with the keyholder again. But this time, he's nowhere to be found. I contact dispatch and request a callback number for the keyholder so that I can advise them of what we found. Dispatch states that the keyholder was still en route to us and was advising an ETA of 5 minutes. I advised dispatch that we had already been out with the keyholder. Dispatch requests I give them a call. So I call dispatch, and she tells me there's no way we were out with a keyholder. Says that the alarm company had only just made contact with one. Eventually the real keyholder arrives on scene, and I ask her about the man that had let us in the building. She asked me to describe him, and so I did. She says that sounds like one of the doctors that used to lease an office on the second floor, at the end of the hall. She then goes on to say that he had committed suicide at his summer home several days ago. I still won't go back there.